So after releasing the last video on the Fianchetto Gambit, which most people don't seem to know, one of the big questions I kept on receiving was, what if white declines the Gambit? Because it seems accepting the Gambit gives black a huge advantage, especially if white is not well prepared. For those of you guys who don't know what the Fianchetto Gambit is or how it goes, well, it's just a surprise weapon that you can try out against e4 players or d4 players. So let's say white begins with e4, then you go with g6 as if you want to play the modern defense, and here pawn to d4 is the top played move in the Lichess database, after which you simply go pawn to f5. So in my last two videos on this Gambit, we saw how bad things can be for white after accepting the Gambit, as that will only give you more time to develop your big pieces as black and open up some more lines. This can be supported by a higher win rate for black after white plays the top played move, as you can see. And I said our main plan goes as follows: queen d6 supporting our g6 pawn and also stopping the London bishop from coming out, followed by bishop g4, then a6, knight c6, bishop h6, e5 and knight e7. This is a very tricky Gambit, you guys. The links are in the comment section down below. But the question that begs to be answered is, what if white declines the Gambit after you play pawn to f5? For example, one comment reads, I encountered e5 on move number 3, declining the Gambit on Lichess, and I had a difficult game. Another comment reads, my opponent responded with knight to f3 on move number 4 instead of bishop d3, and I lost that game. Another concern was, what happens if white doesn't take the g6 pawn on move number 4? I don't see any good follow-up. And this is what we're going to address in today's video, just to give you a very strong foundation. So, after playing pawn to f5, what if white just plays e5? That's number one. Guys, as you can see from the eval bar, after pawn to e5, white loses all of his advantage. First of all, this is no longer a Gambit because we haven't lost any pawn. And so the easiest way to encounter these pawns is by going the Alekhine way or playing in the Alekhine style, beginning with the move pawn to d6. Let me explain. So in the Alekhine defense, white starts with e4, then you play knight f6. After pawn to e5, you go knight d5. And after pawn to c4, you go knight b6. Then immediately after pawn to d4, to destroy this pawn setup, you play pawn to d6. For example, after f4, you simply take on e5. If white takes with a d pawn, you make them lose their right to castle, and this has been proven to be only good for black. But if white takes with the f pawn, you first of all develop your queen's knight according to theory, attacking this pawn, calling for knight f3, after which you go bishop g4, and after bishop e3, you simply take the knight, mess up white's pawn structure on the king side, then go pawn to e6, paving way for your other bishop, and look at this. So what I want you to focus on is the structure of these two central pawns. That's what we see in our Fianchetto Gambit declined as well after e4, g6, d4, f5, and then pawn to e5 by white. So to simplify things for you guys, let me show you a system that you can be following whenever you see this decline variation. So here is the plan. You go pawn to d6, that's number one. If f4, you will take the pawn on e5. Done. Then the next move you will play is pawn to e6, over controlling the d5 square, followed by knight e7. Then next, you develop your b knight on c6, and in case of bishop b5, you go a6, followed by pawn to b5 to create room for your light squared bishop. That's how you develop your light squared bishop. Sometimes if bishop b5 doesn't come, you can still play a6 in advance, followed by pawn to b5 and bishop b7. How about the king side? You simply go pawn to h6, even against pawn to h4, and it will be up to you to decide where you want to castle to, either on f7, short or long, after developing your queen. So this is the simple system that you can follow in the decline variation. Anyway, so once again, just go pawn to d6, playing in the Alekhine style. You're good. You just want to take, right? And what do we see in the Lichess database? You can see with your own eyeballs, they play pawn to f4. That's the top played move. And here, almost every developmental move that you make is good. You can play e6 if you want, or bishop h6, a tricky move, or bishop g7. But the move I like is simply d takes e5. Playing in the Alekhine style, right? White has to take with the f pawn, not the d pawn. Pawn to e6, stopping d5 anyways. Guys, there is no complicated issue here. If anything, think of white's e5 pawn as your defender. This pawn can't go anywhere. It's your shield. Anyway, let's say white plays knight c3. You can even castle your king here on f7. That's just how safe your king is. You can play knight e7 if you want. Over controlling the d5 square, you're just responding to what you're seeing. Let's say after white plays knight to f3, you simply go bishop g7 because you want a castle short, or simply go king f7. Let's say white plays bishop c4, attacking nothing, or you can even go pawn to h6. Why pawn to h6? Just stopping bishop g5 or knight g5. Okay, let's say white castles short. Well, you can even do the same. Just castle short. I don't see any reasonable continuation for white here because of your well advanced f pawn, which is controlling the e4 square. So this is just one plan. Your king will later sit on h7 and you will develop your queenside pieces as highlighted. I just don't see any progress for white from here unless you give this to Stockfish. But anyways, another plan may go as follows. Instead of going knight e7, you can also go pawn to h6. You can literally do anything that you like here. Let's say knight to f3. Now you go knight e7, over controlling the d5 square. Let's say bishop c4 again, attacking nothing. Even knight bc6 makes sense from here. Let's say they castle short because what else can they do? In fact, instead of going bishop g7 here, I can just start expanding on the king side because I have a very strong defense on e5. If h4, I have g4. I mean, what else? Sending the knight back, and then I go knight g6, double attacking this pawn. If pawn to g3, I can even take this pawn. I mean, I can do literally everything because I have no weaknesses at all. Maybe the only argument is that with this kind of pawn structure, black is a little bit passive and it will take a bit of time developing pieces, but at the same time, you have no weaknesses as black. Declining the Fianchetto Gambit is the worst thing that white can do according to Stockfish. Period. So immediately you face the decline variation, it's high time for you to remember this Aleheim strategy of going pawn to d6. Immediately. Let's try the most aggressive line. After pawn to d6, f4, pawn takes, fe, then after pawn to e6, white plays knight c3, and immediately we go knight e7. All normal moves, white plays pawn to h4 because they want to destroy our king side as quickly as they can. Well, the best you can do here to undermine this pawn is to simply go pawn to h6 so that if h5 comes, you go pawn to g5, case closed. Anytime you want to, you can castle long. If white plays knight to f3 for some reason, you can even play knight bc6 here. I don't see anything. Let's say bishop b5, pinning the knight for nothing. I mean, you go pawn to a6, bishop a4, you go pawn to b5. This just helped you to pave way for your light squared bishop. If bishop b3, you need to be patient enough to see that bishop b7 will hang a pawn. So first of all, attack that bishop and if possible, get rid of it so that after AB, this is when you develop your bishop on b7. Guys, all these are random moves. You don't even have to memorize anything. Your main focus should be on the center of the board. So your key pieces are this pawn on e6, the knight on d7, and your queen. This is enough. Whatever happens on the sides of the board like h4, just go pawn to h6, and if h5, you simply go g5, case closed. White's pawn on e5 is your defender. Anyway, but after pawn to d6, let's say white doesn't play pawn to f4. What if they play other moves like knight f3, for example? Well, again, you can just take. That's the whole idea. You just take on e5. So they take with the knight, and because it's not the pawn which is sitting on e5, it now makes sense for us to develop our bishop on g7 because it's attacking something. If bishop f4 holding on to that knight, you can simply go knight to f6, preparing to castle short. Nothing is happening, guys. Let's say bishop c4, stopping you from castling short. This is what they do. You can simply go pawn to e6. Once again, you remember this move, the e6 move, and you are also over controlling the d5 square. Let's say knight c3, this is what they play. You don't have to rush with this move because after all, white hasn't yet castled short. So who knows, maybe they may start a pawn storm after you castle short. So just wait. You can play something like a6, just a prophylactic move, preparing to go b5 next and bishop b7. See what we are doing, same system, same stuff. Let's say a4, stopping your b5 pawn push. By the way, knight c6 is also playable in case you're wondering. Now just to buy time, you can even play knight h5 attacking this bishop. If the bishop goes back, you can even trap it like this. If they play bishop e3 instead of bishop g3, you can go pawn to c5, trying to separate the pawn from the knight. By the way, pawn to c5 is another key move that you should always consider whenever you run out of moves. Like even in this position, you can play pawn to c5. It's not much of a stretch because after d takes c5, you will simply get that pawn back sooner or later after queen takes d1. Let's say rook takes d1. Now you go knight h5 attacking the bishop. If bishop g3, you're simply winning after knight takes, pawn takes, and bishop takes e5. So that won't be possible. Again, if the bishop goes back, you'll simply take the free knight. If knight d3, well and good, you can get rid of white's bishop pair, and after knight takes, you just simply castle your king here. This is one pawn, by the way, so you don't even have to worry about this. After white castles short, you can first of all chase that knight away from that square, and after something like knight e2, that's when you go knight c6 and continue playing chess. I don't see anything here, by the way. g4, you can win this pawn back like this, given a chance. Another question that came up in the comment section was, what if white doesn't take your g6 pawn after they accept the gambit? I mean, after you play pawn to d5, then instead of white taking, maybe they play something else like bishop d3. Well, our plan still remains the same. Queen d6, bishop g4, s6, knight c6, pawn to e5, knight e7, and bishop h6. Of course, the movement of our pieces may change, but the plan will still remain the same. So you are playing queen d6 in advance, just in case white takes your g6 pawn, you are able to take it back and back to the same position. So that answers the question. Just a matter of transposing. Again, after white accepts your gambit, and then you go pawn to d5. I mean, if white plays anything else apart from bishop d3, like let's say knight c3, well, you just take back. That's all. This is no longer a gambit, you are just playing another Dutch defense game with your light squared bishop controlling the e4 square. That's all. If pawn to g4, yeah, strong players like attacking this way, but you can just retreat your bishop back, and let's say pawn to h4, because what else? You simply go knight c6. At worst, you'd love to castle long. Let's say h5, you can even take. I mean, there's nothing here. After they take, you can simply go back to f5. Right after bishop f4, you simply go queen d7, and next you think of castling long, deal done. And another question that I saw in the comments was, after white accepts your gambit and then you go pawn to d5, then fg and hg, what happens if white doesn't play bishop d3 and rather goes knight to f3 first? Guys, once again, this can be a transposition if you think about it. Even in the bishop d3 line, we still see this knight f3 sooner or later. First of all, anything that you can play here, even bishop g7 is okay, but sticking to our plan, you can even go bishop g4. I don't see much of a problem here. If pawn to h3, just leave that bishop there. You start developing other pieces according to our plan, just as I advised. The thing is, white won't take your bishop because of rook takes. So here you can just start with queen d6 once again, protecting your g6 pawn in advance. And this is when you will see them playing something like bishop d3. Sooner or later, this game will transpose. And now you go knight c6, attacking this pawn. If pawn to c3, this is when you play pawn to e5. Remember our strategy. If they take, you take back. I mean, I covered this line in my first tutorial, so you guys should go ahead and watch that. So you go bishop h6. Next, you want to take with the rook and give it a chance. You want to castle long. Very simple stuff. So instead of bishop d3, let's say white tries to complicate things and they play knight c3. Just an example, here you can even go knight c6 if you want, or start with a6 first, but knight c6 leaves this pawn weak. If you think about it, if bishop b5 anyways, you simply castle long. That's all. Your light squared bishop is safe. This is the setup. If they take your knight, you can take back with your queen. You're still safe. If they castle short, now your light squared bishop is in trouble. So you get rid of it like this. After queen takes, you simply go bishop h6, just like I mentioned, or even better knight h6, because now you want to put your knight on f5. If white doesn't take that knight, this can be anyone's game with perfect play, but I only see black having a great initiative. Anyway, all in all, the best white can do in the Fianchetto Gambit is just to accept it. Declining the Gambit will allow you to go the Ali Hines way, and white will have no immediate attack or whatsoever, believe you me, with your teeth. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. You can watch my last 2 tutorials on this Gambit. That's when you will understand this to the fullest. Also, make sure to follow me on Patreon, which is my membership page where I post other premium content and other study materials that I can't post on YouTube for our paid members. Again, remember to subscribe, hit the like button, share this video. Until next time, bye bye.